was going to do this little presentation in 2020. As it turns out, I was sick that day, and as it is, when COVID came along, it's, as I was telling some other people, it's far more relevant now. I'm going to talk about inflation. I got a $7 head of lettuce in here. Just kidding. By the way, dues are going up to $60. No, just kidding. Okay, what I'm going to talk about actually is inflation 100 years ago in Germany, not in Canada. Now, I've got a bit of a background here before I show you a few things. To pay for the large cost of the First World War, Germany suspended the gold standard, as a lot of countries did. And however, unlike a lot of the other countries like France, Great Britain, Canada, those countries all imposed income tax. Yeah, aren't we lucky to pay for the war? And once the war was over, they left it there. Okay, the German Emperor and the Reichstag decided to fund the war entirely by borrowing, and the government believed they'd be able to pay off all this money by winning the war, of course, which would be over by Christmas. Everybody seemed to think that. They would reap the bounty from all the nations they conquered. Okay, during the war, the German government used extensive propaganda and censorship to actually hide the increase in inflation from the people, or attempt to. People largely saw through it. The government continued to print more money, which had no economic resources to back it. Like about that, to buy some cryptocurrency. Okay, I'm not an economist. I've given you the simplified version. If you want to know more, get a book or look it up online. I can't answer any questions about the economics. Okay, the inflation in Germany reached a peak in November of 1923. And over time, in the beginning, the inflation in Germany got worse until it reached the point of ridiculousness. The paper money became useless. The usual stories are found in books and on the internet. Children playing with bundles of money instead of wooden blocks on the street. People using wheelbarrows to carry their money to the store. Companies paid their workers twice a day so that their wives could run out and buy food before the price doubled the next day. Here's one story. A woman went to the store with her money in a wicker basket. She briefly put the basket down, and of course some dastardly thief grabbed it. Grabbed the basket, tipped the money out, and buggered off down the street with the basket. The basket was worth more than the money that was in it. So basically the barter system and the US dollar were the only things that were trusted. So nobody had any of those. Now I have this brief, small chart. I couldn't blow it up any bigger, but it just shows you the cost of the German mark to the US dollar. And as you see, it goes from 4.2 marks in 1914. At the end of the war, it's at 48 marks. And of course, by November 1923, 4.2 trillion marks equals $1. So, okay, a loaf of bread in November 1922 costs 160 marks. A year later, it costs 200 billion marks. So, the usual way which you can sort of visualize this is by looking at the currency. I have some, but I didn't bring it here tonight. Also by looking at the postage stamps, which I have here in this box. And of course, I don't know if anybody, as long as if everybody's aware, back before the euro currency, the German currency was 100 pfennigs equals 1 mark. Simple decimal system set up there. So I'm going to show you a series of different postcards or envelope covers and basically discuss them. Here's my first one. It's just a standard postcard. Now I realize these are small. Most of you won't be able to see them, but You can come up afterwards and take a look. Now this is 1904, way before the war. The cost of stamp, 2 pfennigs. Cheap. Send out hundreds at a time, no problem. And, of course, here's a nice lady in Alsatian national dress here. Now this is 1912, right before the war. It's gone up to 5 pfennigs. You know, there's a bit of inflation under normal circumstances everywhere. And so that's that. As we progress, 1917, I don't even know where that place is. Anyway, 7.5 pfennigs. So if you notice, you can see the color of the stamp in the corners changing color. See it going up in cost. And 1919. Well, there's 2 stamps on there now. 12.5 pfennig. So it's going up little by little. Sort of like the head of lettuce. No, I'm just kidding. 1920, 30 pfennigs. So you can see it's, I think Canada Post announces their next increase on January 22nd or something. I'm just kidding. I don't think it's going up. So 1921, 80 pfennigs. So it's 1 year, went from 30 pfennigs to 80 pfennigs. That's nothing. 1922, another year, it's 2.5 marks. 3 times what it was the year before. If you're on a fixed income, you're SOL. Be honest, truthful. June of 1923. Now 1923 is the key year. You want to see what the disaster is. Here's June, 40 marks. So, like 20 times the year before. Now, this may seem strange here. Germany did not have the ability to print stamps with higher values fast enough to keep up with the rate of inflation and be able to get them out to the post offices. They would order higher value stamps again, but the rate of inflation had gone up. By the time they get them in, you know, they're basically useless, and the whole vicious cycle goes over and over again, repeatedly. Now, with that background, the next letters are a bit more interesting. These all numbered, so I'm trying to. 1923. 102.5 marks. There's almost enough room to put the address in there. Oh, I forgot to show you the back. Oh, it gets better now. August. Here we are, 1,000 marks. So within a couple months, it's gone up 10 times, and with the usual back covered. So now they're having some issues here, of course, because they're running out of room. So that was the beginning of August. At the end of August, it's 20,000 marks. Now, here's the front. There's the back. However, if you look at this, you see right on this edge here, there's a different color of stamps there. And if I grab this bottom row of stamps and flip it up, you can see those other stamps underneath there. So what they've done is they've taken the back of the envelope, plastered it with a set of stamps, stamped them, canceled them, then plastered another layer of stamps on top of it and canceled them all out. And if you look at this section right here, they've added a third layer of stamps on top of the other 2 layers. This is thick like a Cheerios box, you know? So now they're layering these things up because they don't have enough room to stick all the stamps on there because of the printing issues. They can't get enough high value stamps. Now, what do we got here? This is about the same time, same rate, 20,000 marks, at least they're consistent. However, you notice here, there's a little white section of envelope or paper here. So what they've done is, there's not enough room. So they've glued on a separate piece of paper to the envelope so that they have enough room to stick all the stamps on there. And of course, you have both the backs already covered too. So you're getting glue-on additions, layers. What's going to happen next? What we got? Now, at the same time, of course, they're thinking of these things. There's a lot of creative people around. The best option, of course, is to get a big honking envelope, you know, full size. Now, Franz isn't here, you know, pardon my bad German here. There used to be a section here which probably had some valuable stamps on it. Somebody probably cut them off before I ever got a hold of this, but you know, they're resorting to using bigger envelopes, and of course, it's all covered. You know, 200 mark stamps, you know.
What, or you would have to translate, but
Oh, that was something.
what messages are people putting on a postcard that's, it must be a very small message. And
Yeah.
And then,
Well, generally
what
you
is
don't.
so important to tell somebody that you're gonna spend all that stuff?
I don't know about the letters. Basically, I collect postcards. I think I did something on them earlier, years ago, but, and if anybody's interested, there's a big postcard show down in Toronto at the end of February. What you see is, it gets to about 1922, nobody's using postcards anymore. That whole period, it just, you couldn't get enough stamps or enough high value stamps, and of course, if you have a choice of feeding your kids or sending out a postcard, well, who needs a postcard? It's that simple. So you just don't see them for those years. You know, it's, anyway, let's get 14. Now, we get into September 1923. 67,000 marks to send an envelope across the country. So they're getting some higher value stamps. These three in the upper corner make up 60,000 of that 67,000. Don't complain about the letters. I'm just kidding. Now, this is October 1923, a month later, 5 million marks to send a letter. Now, what they've done here, and you won't be able to see this, is they've overlapped the stamps. So they stuck one stamp and they stuck another one on top of it, but they left about the top 25% of the first stamp still showing. And they just went down the line, adding additional stamps. So this envelope is, what, 5 by 7? There's 102 stamps on the back of this envelope. 102. Amazing. Okay, November 1st, 1923. Now this letter is an overseas letter to Chicago, so a bit more, but 200 million marks. You know, in 1900 that would buy you 3 or 4 blocks of houses. However, the stamps on here are 5 million marks each. So now, of course, they don't need that many anymore. They're able to fit everything on there. They're starting to have enough room. You don't have to have any added on, pasted on pieces of paper anymore. Now, November 16th, there it is. 2 stamps. 10 billion marks. 10 billion marks to send a letter. It says 5 Millarden. Millarden is the German word for billion. And it's kind of confusing. The German word Billinen is actually trillion. Which makes sense, but whatever. So, there we are. 10 billion marks. Send a letter.
So how many pennies?
Well, that would be, well, 100 pfennigs per mark. So too many zeros.
Yeah.
Notice on, you can see on these stamps here, they actually put the zeros on there. There's 9 zeros on there. Okay. One last thing left here, so I think I'm not boring you here. Okay, now during October, November, this is a bit more background, of November 1923, the German government ran a radical new plan to base the currency not on the gold standard, which of course they weren't doing anyway, and not with no backing at all, as what currently existed at the time, but on the land used for agriculture and business. This new currency was called the Rentenmark. Renta basically means mortgage, so they mortgaged the land and only printed out enough money that equaled the amount of what the land was worth. So the German people accepted this currency and the currency stabilized. And it went back to normal, and this is, as I said earlier, a simplification. So if you want to read more about this, you have options to do that. I'm not an expert. The byproduct of this time of hyperinflation was that Germany had warehouses full of useless, never used inflation stamps that were sold off as scrap. Stamp dealers bought truckloads of these at pennies on the pound. At stamp shows in the 20th century, especially in the US, you would see stacks of whole sheets of these stamps being sold because there was a lot of, after the Second World War, German soldiers in Germany at overseas bases, and they were there until basically I think unification or something like that, along with the Canadian base at Baden-Baden. And so the Germans would buy all this stuff up and bring it all home with them. And so you would see them being sold. You still see them occasionally, but they're not as common as they once were. So I was at a, believe it or not, a coin show, and the guy had a stack of these sheets of stamps there. Each stamp, there's 100 of them, is worth, let's see, I have my glasses at home, 10 million marks each. So this is like 1 billion marks. Yeah. And the guy also had the envelope that it came in. I bought that off of him. He wanted an extra $5. So. But there's piles of these floating around, and of course, it gets to the point where stamp dealers start separating them and selling them off in smaller sections, and trying to get more money out of them. But each of these little stamps is worth 25 cents. Big deal. There's so many of them. I couldn't sell that for that price. Nickel.
And they're worth more now than they were originally.
Yes, but what is worth, or what the value of these things is these stamps with the 5 billion marks on. These are rare, hard to find. You notice my progression there ended on, I think, November 16th, but it didn't end actually in Germany till the end of November. It's because I can't find anything from the end of November because they don't want $200 or $300 for an envelope with those higher rates on them. And the weird thing is, for if anybody collects stamps here, what you get high values for are mint unused stamps. So you've got some nice mint Queen Victoria stamps sitting in your closet or in your attic somewhere. They're worth big bucks. The minute you use them, it's like 1/10, 1/100th of the value. In Germany, during this time period, the exact opposite is true. There's so many of them sitting in warehouses, if they actually used them, they're worth 10 times what the mint ones are. So it's a bit weird if you're a stamp dealer, you're trying to figure that out and work out your pricing or something like that, but it's so rare to get them used. So anyway, that's it.
All right.